Hi, my name's Kaz Riley. I'm the founder of Sexual Freedom Hypnosis, and I'm so excited to be part of this amazing project, the Hypno Summit, which has got just so many amazing topics and presenters and so much information within it. I really feel that it's going to move the hypnosis community forward on again, especially at a time when we all need so much knowledge and just kind of to share, to pull so much information is a really marvelous thing. This particular talk that I'm doing for you today is about working with the transgender community, in particular, working with the inner child within the transgender community. Now, just for clarity, just so you understand kind of where I'm coming from, anything that I teach, I always teach from a point of experience, the things that I experience with my clients here in my clinic in the UK. I always teach things that I use, that I work with, um, simply because I think, I always say my clients are my best teachers, and then I am lucky enough to be able to come and share with you the things that I have learned. The transgender community is a community that has become much more open and recognized and able to be themselves essentially over the past few years, which is a really amazing and wonderful thing. Um, and certainly people that are transitioning face several challenges and issues and things that perhaps where we're cisgendered, we don't really ever even have to think about. When we look at it in the kind of a bigger picture, it's not really just a case of somebody being able to live as the gender in which they identify, and sometimes then going through an operation to make their body match their mind, essentially. But there are issues and there are challenges and obstacles along the way that people within this community often have to face and overcome. There are many kind of um, parts to the process of transition. The first one being really kind of being able to just kind of accept and come out, if you like, to friends and family, at work, all of those kinds of things. And often the clients that I'm working with will tell me that they didn't do that until they were pretty old, sometimes kind of around the age of 30, which means for 30 years, certainly, they have had to live a lie. Often they have told absolutely nobody about how they truly feel, how they truly identify, and have been leading very kind of secret and double lives sometimes. And that in itself can cause a lot of anxiety. Often when people then do come out, they're met with love and compassion and an overwhelming sense of relief. But for some people, that still isn't the case. They're met with kind of horror and people not accepting or people in denial, and are often rejected by the very people that they're seeking support from. Now, for a lot of people, once they've kind of come out, they then start the process of transitioning. And for many, and some will only ever do this, is they just live as the gender they identified as. So that will be how they dress and how they kind of address themselves, if you like, the pronouns that they may use, the names that they may call themselves. But often for many clients, they then go through the process of a full transition, which incorporates all kinds of things like hormone treatment, in some cases an operation to have the penis taken away, have breasts implanted, have a vagina fashioned. There's all kinds of things that can happen as people go through that process of transition. But one of the things that they have to prove usually is that they are living a life as the gender they identify as. So for male to female transitions, they often have to prove, certainly here in the UK, that they are living as a woman. For example, and have done so or are doing so for at least 2 years before an operation could be considered on the National Health Service. Now, that's absolutely fine. But what my clients report back to me is that there has to be a very stereotypical woman. So it's not necessarily how they identify as being female. It's very much more about how, the NHS kind of has their criteria. So they have to dress in a particular way. They're expected to wear their hair a certain way, to wear clothes that would be seen as being very typically female, wear high heels, to wear makeup, to kind of do things that are seem to be female, to kind of almost prove that they are in fact female. And that's a very interesting thing, because anybody that's cis female has never had to prove that they're female, only that they are. So that we can do as, I'm a cis female, therefore I can do whatever I want. I can wear what I want. I can do whatever job that I want. I can have hobbies that could be seen to be masculine or feminine. I can play the sports that I want to play. And often, people that are in the process of transition are very much discouraged from doing that. So not only have they been trapped in the wrong body for a long, 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 long time, and had to kind of reject and deny the part of themselves that they truly felt, when they do embrace that, they're then being told still that it have to be a particular way. And for many, that just doesn't fit. We all have masculine and feminine traits. And, we should embrace all of those and not be too concerned about whether something to be deemed to be masculine or feminine or male or female. It's just the things that we like and we enjoy doing, and our tastes and our opinions are just very much a personal and individual thing. Just for kind of full kind of disclosure, if you like, the majority of the work that I do is with people that are transitioning or have transitioned from male to female. I do have clients that have transitioned from female to male, but my experience is far greater working with the male to female community. So much of the things that I talk about will be in that context, simply because that's where my experience lies. And I think it's always good to kind of talk and teach from a point of experience rather than what I think. I think what I know is probably better. When I first get a client who usually for me, when I see them, they've already had the operation, they've kind of transitioned. It's they're coming to terms with everything that's happened. They're kind of looking to kind of draw a line under certain aspects of their lives and kind of move forward. And for many of them, what they're kind of were expecting that, and I think sometimes that's what a lot of the caregivers expect as well, because there's, other than a follow-up, a 6-week follow-up after the transition operation, there's actually very little that's available to people post-transition. They kind of look at, there's a lot of psychiatry and psychology that goes on pre-transition, which is really about making sure that somebody really does have gender dysphoria, that this is the right and the right path for them, which is understandable. But afterwards, there is very little. And what I find is that, there are some clients certainly who, finally their mind and their body kind of marry up and match. And they feel good. They just kind of go on and are able to live their lives, without too many problems. But there are many of those clients that they still have a lot of anxiety. They still have a lot of unresolved issues. They still have kind of body issues. They lack body confidence. They're trying to get used to a new body. They're trying to get used to the way that people will treat them differently. And often, they suffer with things like depression. A lot of members with that community are prone to things like self-harming. Many kind of hide away, can become quite reclusive. So there's still a lot of work to be done post-transition for many transgender clients just to help them to kind of come to terms with the fact that now they do have the right body to match their mind, to kind of everything identifies in a kind of unique and married up kind of way. Now, when we actually think about this, when we kind of actually take a step back, we all know that it's never just as simple about how you look and how you feel just needs to be the same. We know as therapists that there is a lot that goes into how we look and how we feel, and how we feel is actually the most important part. And when we look at the journey that many people that take within the transgender community, that period of being younger, that period often between the ages of about 5 and up until the point at which they transition, you know, most of my clients will tell me they knew that there was something very different about them, that something didn't feel right, probably from about the age of 5 or 6. So that's a long, 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 long time to really kind of not feel right in your own skin. We all have and have had that experience of not fitting in somewhere, but not actually fitting in with yourself is a much bigger deal. It's a much bigger thing. And that's something that people within the transgender community lived with day in, day out, 7 days a week, night and day. For the whole of the time up until the point that one, they realized that they were transgender, and then later when they were actually able to do something about that to kind of make that transition so that they felt complete as a person in terms of, you know, their body reflected the gender that they feel inside. Now, when we think about that, that's actually a lot to kind of cope with, because they often will have been rejecting themselves for a long time, and often will have kind of gone to the opposite end. I know a lot of my clients tell me that they were kind of almost kind of tried to be a male stereotype, to kind of, so nobody would either find out that they had these thoughts and feelings, or even to try and convince themselves that they didn't have these thoughts and feelings about their gender. So often they've been quite disengaged in school, have been very isolated. You know, not being able to be yourself stops you from fitting in many places. And sometimes we'll talk about kind of being disengaged at school, we'll get into trouble. Sometimes we'll kind of get into crime, almost trying to prove themselves to be kind of masculine and manly, simply to hide the fact that they were transgender. And often we'll talk about, you know, dressing in female clothes and then hiding them all away, and sometimes being caught, or the clothes being found, and the shame and the guilt around that, and the lies that they had to tell to kind of cover that up. And you know, a lot of that, I mean, that goes on for a long time for some of these clients. You know, you're talking some of them 20 plus years where they've had to kind of live this kind of hidden life and almost hide themselves away from themselves. And you can imagine just having the right body suddenly doesn't necessarily kind of clear up that kind of trauma or those experiences. And this is where hypnosis is truly beautiful and magical, and can really make a difference in when we're working with with this community. So not only can we help with the obvious things like body image and getting people really connected in with their mind and body, that mind body connection is so important, but also things like self-esteem, self-confidence, and really being able to get people to kind of be confident in themselves. You know, often people within the transgender community are then wondering if they pass as a woman in the male to female transition clients. And you know, that's a worry, because I don't know a cis female who worries about passing as a woman. They just are women. And I think that's quite a big one as well. So not only now, you know, the question is not only now am I a woman, but do I actually pass as one? You know, will people believe that I am? even though, physically and mentally, that's exactly what they are. So there's a lot of kind of things that, as cisgendered people, we just don't even have to consider, um, or even think about, or we take for granted even, I don't have to think about how I wear my hair. I can wear it short or long. I can do what I like. I can wear what clothes I want. I don't have to worry if I pass as a woman or not, because it would never even occur to me that I wouldn't. So there's a lot to kind of unpack, and there's a lot of things that we can do to help this community kind of really get in touch with themselves, but also to let go of some of the traumas of the past. And one of the techniques that we use for anybody that needs to do that within hypnosis, which is just one of the most beautiful and amazing techniques, it's just it's just fantastic. It's one of my most favorite, most used kind of techniques that I use for all kinds of things with all kinds of people. And that is, of course, healing the inner child. And when we're working with the transgender community, healing the inner child is such a powerful tool, because it allows our clients to look at both the kind of masculine and feminine inner child that they have, or the inner children that they have. There might be several, and allow them for the first time quite often to feel heard and loved and accepted, and also to help those clients understand that we all have masculine and feminine aspects to our personality, to our tastes, to our hobbies, to the things that we like to do. And, we are allowed to have both, however we identify gender wise. And I think that's a big thing. It's not about whether or not someone can pass or not as a woman or as a man. It's very much about how somebody feels about themselves, how they connect in with themselves, how they are allowed to be themselves, and how they can enjoy the things that they love doing, whatever those things may be. Now, inner child work, is kind of known as a regressive technique. But actually, I always feel, unless we're working with a particular scenario or trauma, or memory even, I always think it much more to be kind of like a hybrid between parts therapy and a regressive technique, because really the inner children are parts of us that feel a particular way or need a particular thing. And the idea is that they are a bit dissociated from the rest of us. So we've all heard that phrase, haven't we? And I don't know, something happened and I just felt like I was a kid in the playground again being bullied, or it just felt like I did when my father was telling me off when I was 7. And we all have those bits of us that still can react in quite childlike ways, or in the way that we would have reacted when we were a child. And I think that what the inner child work allows us to do is to allow those aspects of us that feel childlike, vulnerable, scared, frustrated, confused, unloved, not nurtured, all of those parts of us. The inner child work allows us to really address those things. And those things obviously underpin things like self-worth, self-love, self-esteem, self-confidence, feeling good enough, all those things that we work with on a day-to-day base across the board as hypnotherapists. Inner child work really allows us to kind of get to the very basics of that, so that we can feel nurtured and loved and appreciated and accepted and safe on a very fundamental level, especially when people didn't when they were younger. And as we work with the inner child or the inner children, what's very interesting, even cisgendered people will sometimes have male or female inner children, but certainly the transgender community will often have both. And when we dig a little bit deeper, often what I discover is that some or all of those inner children, if you like, have been pushed away. So often, people will talk about growing up with that kind of female voice inside, or trying to push away that kind of feminine aspect of themselves. And then the opposite happening in later years, where they're trying to push away the male aspect of themselves. When actually, in reality, what we need to do to help that client have that kind of resolution and wholeness from within is to actually accept and nurture and love every kind of inner child. And I think that's truly important. I've even had clients tell me that the child doesn't have a gender, it's just kind of a thing. And in some cases, actually, they've described it as a monster, which often is how they felt, like there was some kind of monster, which is kind of a massively negative view or opinion to hold about yourself, as being some kind of monster. So by helping clients and by taking them through this process of inner child work, sometimes repeatedly, sometimes it's just one session, but often it's a repeated process until we've got all those aspects of those inner children feeling very safe, very loved, very cared for, very nurtured by the client themselves, and that feeling of self-acceptance. And then we can allow the client, or we can help the client to move forwards much more easily, having got the resolution from much of their past. So the way that I facilitate these sessions is very similar to how I would facilitate any kind of inner child work that I do. I always, with the transgender community, I would usually, and it's very rare that I would use this induction at any other time, actually, I will often use either a progressive relaxation induction, unless they're extremely anxious. And then I will tend to use like a fractionation, like a Vox fractionation method, and then lead into a progressive relaxation. Now, we all know we don't have to be relaxed to be in hypnosis. We all know the criticism of the kind of progressive relaxation methods. But one of the things that I always say to my students is, you can use anything as long as you know why you're using it, why you've picked that particular method, whatever part of the process that may be. And with a progressive relaxation, what that allows you to do, or allows the client to do, is to start to connecting with their body. We're asking them to physically relax and to notice and sometimes tense and relax various parts of their body. So we're putting them very presently in their body. We're making them become internally focused, as well as we're telling them and showing them that they can be in control of their own body. And I think that is a very powerful kind of subconscious message that we send. The type of induction that we use, I think, is really important. If we've got somebody who's got anxiety off the scale, I will nearly always use an externally focused induction, because it takes the focus away. But in this case, even if they're anxious, we want them to be focused internally, and then to show them that they're able to take control of their body and their relaxation. One of the other things that I will sometimes use is a very condensed version of autogenic training. So, the things like, my right hand is heavy, I'm absolutely calm and relaxed. My left hand is heavy, I'm absolutely calm and relaxed. Obviously slower than that, but I will take them through that again, so that they can kind of become aware of their body, but in a very positive way, and feel very connected to their kind of bodily responses and just their general calm and relaxation, just to kind of prove to the client, if you like, that they're actually able to do that before we've done any of the hard work, before we've done any of the therapy. One of the things that I'll often use when I'm working with the inner child is another kind of classic script, which is the Ericksonian early learning set. And, I use a variation of that. I don't use scripts as such. I have formats. And I think once you've done something a lot of times, you are still scripted, but you're not necessarily reading a script. We're just kind of adapting it to the client that's in there. But the way that script is worded, that method is worded, just even right at the very start, which it's along the lines of, and ever since the day that you were born, you've learned and experienced something each and every moment of your life. And that is a perfect kind of preamble lead in to inner child work. We're setting the scene, if you like. And I'll often use, the very traditional 10 to 1 countdown, something like a now deepener. There's that great kind of part within the early learning set that says things along the lines of, and soon you'll find that your mind will just begin to drift and wander. It doesn't matter where you drift or where you go, my voice will go with you. And then there's the other part which talks about, just being completely aware of your body, and then being unaware of your body, and then aware of your body again. So, really great stuff that really sets the scene for some really great inner child work. I'm a big believer in, choosing the induction and the deepener and the kind of the preamble, and thinking about that very carefully according to who sat in front of you. I'm not a fan of using the same thing for everybody time and time again. It's not about what my favorite induction is. It's about what's best for the client there. So anyway, there's my little side segue into inductions and why I use the one that I do in this case. When I'm working with inner child work, the one of the things that I always do is I always create a safe place. In fact, every client that I have, usually I've created a safe place for them. I work with a lot of trauma. I work a lot with a lot of kind of traumatic issues. And I give the suggestion that the client can come back to this safe place just like that whenever they need to. And, should I tell them they can go to their safe place and click my fingers, I can take them there. So for some reason, I just need to pull them back from something, or we need to look at something from afar, we can do it with just a word and a click, and the client instantly feels safer. And of course, if a client feels safer, they're much more likely to address some of the things that they need to address, things that perhaps frighten them a little bit, things that they hold anxiety and fear about. So we're able to do that, and it just gives them that kind of extra safety net. What I also do when I'm working with inner child is that I create a safe place within a safe place. And I usually do that by asking the client to visualize that they have got either a circle of white light, a force field, a bubble, a wall, whatever kind of works for them around them, but one that they can see through and over so that they can see their inner child on the other side of that boundary, if you like. And essentially that's what we're doing, is we're firming up the client's boundary, and we're also giving the suggestion that they can bring in who or whatever they choose into that boundary, but nobody or nothing can come into that boundary without their explicit permission. So it gives them that very safe space to be. It also gives them the chance to kind of view or imagine or sense or feel their inner children, if you like, from afar. So they can kind of appraise the situation. They can kind of see what is what, and what needs perhaps addressing first, which part of them is feeling most vulnerable, which inner child looks most upset, whatever it may be, which one's smiling and happy. And, I'll ask them to kind of look and just notice how many inner children they have, what gender they are, what the expression is on their face, and the clothes that they're wearing, or, anything that they need to notice. Now, I then ask them to invite the relevant children, or the children that they need to work with, into that safe space, into that safe, calm space, where they will be welcomed with open arms, love and acceptance. And I really leave it up to the client as to how they go about doing that, whether, they want to bring in one by one and do it that way, or they want to bring them all in, or however, however the client needs to kind of work with those inner children. And, I give the suggestion that everyone is welcome. Everybody is welcome with open arms, love and affection. And, I tell the client that they need to sit down with that inner child or inner children. And for the first time, they really need to give them their full attention, their compassion, their understanding, and they needed to allow them to be heard. They need to open their hearts and their ears and truly listen to what the inner child has to say to them and what needs to be said. And then I tell them that, during that time, I'm going to remain quiet. You'll just hear me every once in a while give a few words of just calm and affirmation, but they can take all the time that they need. They're not hurried in any way, to take all the time that they need. And to, when they've done that, when they've truly listened, they've truly heard, and they know that their inner child or their inner children feels heard and understood, then to let me know, either with an IMR, a nod of the head, or just by saying the word yes. And now that can take a long time. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's fairly quick. But sometimes, I've waited just with the kind of allowing the client to know that I'm still there for 15, 20 minutes, sometimes even longer, while the client goes through that process. And I'm watching the client as they go through that process. And usually it's a very emotive process. You can see the expression, you can see the changes in the breathing, you can see the kind of the calm that comes over them once they've got to that point. And basically, I'll ask the client, once I've got that yes, if there is anything that they wish to share or to talk about, to help them to fight, to allow those inner children to feel safe, loved, accepted, and appreciated. And sometimes there is. Sometimes it might be that they feel scared. Sometimes it might be that they're just feeling very vulnerable. And then I ask the client whether they've sometimes they've said no. So we're they know that their inner children are feeling pretty safe. Is I ask them then to bring in the kind of the adult, that them, and to really kind of take charge of the situation, to allow them to feel loved and nurtured, to tell them that they are a part of them, that they love them, that they accept them, that even in the past, if they rejected them, that they were sorry. They did the best they could at the time, but now they can do things differently. Now they have the resources to do things differently, so that they can really accept and embrace those parts of themselves. And it's a very interesting and moving process to watch as the client brings in each of those inner children. And we're all the way through that, I'm giving suggestions about how loved every part of us is, how there's no part that's discriminated against, how whether it's a feminine or masculine part or a gender neutral part, that each one is loved and appreciated, each one is part of them. And to bring those things in so that they feel whole again and connected and really loved and nurtured in that space, that they will be listened to in the future, that their opinion matters, that the way they feel is, it matters, that, that truly they are who they are, and they can express and accept every single part of themselves. Usually then, once we've done that, I will then future pace a client. I always future pace my clients, or studio orientate them, as I was taught it was called, to a place where they are then living the best life that they can, that they can see themselves feeling very comfortable within themselves, where they're not questioning whether or not they pass as a woman, where they are just a woman. And often we'll, if we've time in that particular session, take them through a process of kind of really appreciating their female form, if you like, whatever that means for them, and noticing that they have indeed always been a woman. They've always been a woman internally, and now the external part of them matches up. And we can do this over several sessions. A lot of it is about building that body confidence and about healing those inner children. Usually at a subsequent session, I will go back and check that the inner child is feeling safe, is feeling calm, is feeling feeling loved and nurtured. And one of the things that I will often do after we've done that inner child part is also bring in the higher self, that really allows the whole person, so the adult self and all of the inner children, to feel that sense of self-worth, self-acceptance, self-love, with the suggestions that all of those things come from within, and that the higher self is part of them. And it's that that's wonderful kind of loving, caring, accepting, nurturing presence that's all around them. So many aspects to the inner child. They can come up with all kinds of things, and it really is a case of dealing with whatever the client kind of comes up with and helping them to kind of get that resolution to allow that inner child to feel loved and accepted and to be part of them, whatever part that may be. It may be the naughty child, it could be the one that feels extremely rejected. Just kind of bringing it in and allowing that child to feel accepted, and to explain to the naughty child that they did the best that they could at the time, and maybe they were kind of acting in a particular way for a good reason, and that reason is no longer needed because it's loved and accepted. So kind of bringing those things back in again. Now, as part of my toolbox for this lecture, two of my clients, who are both male to female, and have transitioned from male to female, have very kindly allowed me to interview them on an audio format, so you can really hear firsthand some of the challenges that they have both faced, and about how they kind of have dealt with. They've both dealt with it in very different ways. Emma has had much more problems in kind of getting that body confidence. Lisa, really since the point of transition, apart from a bit of anxiety, generally just felt like everything matched up and it was kind of moving forwards and feeling good. Also, they talk about how being misgendered affects them and how they've learned how to kind of do things slightly differently and to kind of read people kind of differently. But they'll also talk about how still this kind of, do I pass as a woman? And then when they do feel like they pass, because they have interests, things like gaming and, things that are seen to be typically male kind of interests, then they feel out of place there. So we can see how just this whole process is very confusing, whereas when we're cisgendered, we really don't even think about those things. So it's a really wonderful and amazing community to work with. There's so much to it, just in terms of really helping people to just be themselves, to get that level of self-acceptance. Inner child work is an amazing technique to use with many different kinds of clients, but in particular the transgender community that have some really unique kind of issues, that have things and challenges to deal with that really the rest of us just never even think about. We've never really even had to consider. And I think, many of the tools that we have as hypnotherapists, we can adapt them and change them around to kind of really kind of mold around our clients to help them to get that self-love and self-acceptance, to feel perfectly connected with themselves and to heal those things from the past that they had to deal with. 20 plus years is a long time to feel as if you're in the wrong body, to have to pretend to be something that you're not in terms of your gender. It affects every part of people's lives. And once we allow our clients and we help them to really embrace every aspect of themselves, they realize as they move forward as themselves, themselves as a woman or themselves as a man. But ultimately, it's about being them. It's not about being a stereotype. And I think that's the thing. I think it's about helping people to know that they don't have to be a stereotype, that they can leave all the stereotypes in the past, and ultimately all they need to be is them.